Yeah. Thank you for the question. So this is a thoughtful question. You are correct that I have pledged as U.S. President to shut down the FBI. I believe it is a politicized institution. I believe that it has set back law enforcement in this country. The same FBI that threatened Martin Luther King Jr. with suicide 60 years ago is the same FBI that threatens political opponents of a different persuasion today, the same FBI that is hiding and sitting on this manifesto that it could have released to the public, the same FBI that in other instances has released the manifestos of mass shooters in this country. And so to the question of who would investigate it, there are 35,000 officers, there are 35,000 employees in the FBI. 15,000 are frontline agents who would do better work in an agency that was not yet politicized.
Thank you very much. There are no two stronger champions of the intellectual property rights of innovators and patent holders than the two leaders of this committee, Senator Kuhn, Senator Tillis, and I support your efforts in that respect. I do have a different concern that I want to talk about. It's really important, your responsibility to have patents issued timely, appropriately for innovators. It's your responsibility to help enforce those patents so that the innovators get the benefit of the intellectual property that they created. But what I've seen is, in particular in the drug industry, an abuse by patent holders of that period of exclusivity. That is an extraordinary benefit that is provided to the innovator who comes up with a drug. They get a period of exclusivity, essentially monopoly, and it involves something that is absolutely essential and vital to the well-being of American citizens. But as you know, many of these patent holders then use devices to extend that period beyond the original grant of exclusivity. I just want to give an example of AbbVie and Humira. That period of exclusivity was supposed to expire in 2016. In Europe, it did. But by creating a patent thicket and using the term of art that AbbVie in its own documents used, a patent estate, they were able to create litigation obstacles to biosimilars and competitors coming on the market at the time that their period of exclusivity ended. And what that meant, I'm just showing this chart, 2016, this is what the price was of the Humira, $1,870. They've extended the patent all the way through 2023. It's now almost $3,200. During that time, there was an extra cost to U.S. taxpayers and folks who are purchasing health care of $19 billion, $100 billion in additional revenue. And where you have a patent system that can be abused by the patent holders and they go beyond the period of exclusivity, it's brutal on the cost of health care for American employers who are providing health care through employment, to taxpayers through the Medicare and Medicare program, and to private payers. Humira in the U.S. is $3,000. Right now in Sweden, it's $225. $10 in Germany. So the question I have, and I'm sure this is a concern to you, is what is the ability and the commitment of the Patent Office to stop the extension of that period of exclusivity and monopoly power that has been so consistently abused by the drug companies to rip off American taxpayers, American employers, and American consumers?
Thank you, Senator, for shedding light on that critically important issue. As you know, President Biden has made lowering prescription drug prices in America a key.
Is lower. I want to know what you see as the obligation of the Patent Office to not, on the one side, protect the patent rights of the intellectual property holders. I get that.
Yep.
But the abuse by the patent holders to extend beyond the period of exclusivity so they can rip off American consumers.
So I can let you know what the USPTO is doing in that regard. Certainly patents cannot be extended themselves, the actual patent, unless there's a patent term adjustment. We are looking into those patent term adjustments. Indeed, our Office of Patent Quality Assurance is reviewing applications that have the highest risk for unwarranted extensions of the patent term. In addition to this, we issued a request for comment for robust and reliable patents to get feedback on what more we can do, including with regard to obviousness type double patenting. That is one of the reasons that U.S. patents can continue to issue where they don't in other countries.
Let me just ask
Yes.
this. I don't get it where you get a patent, let's say, for 20 years, and it goes on for 30 years or 35 years. I mean, 20 years is easy enough to figure out. That's when it should end. And there's got to be some capacity on the part of our system to deal with that extension abuse. So I'd really welcome some concrete suggestions or legislative proposals.
Chair of the National Security Subcommittee, Mr. Lukemeyer is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome all of you. Mr. Ellison, welcome back. Mr. Zeitcher, in your testimony you emphasized the significance of climate policy and its impact on capital allocation. To me, this seems like a disguised version of Operation Choke Point, where regulators are picking and choosing what industries have access to banking services, including access to financing. Can you explain how regulatory attempts to impose climate policies on the private sector can affect investment decisions and economic performance?
Yeah, such regulatory efforts, particularly aimed at the fossil energy industry and others as well, would have the effect of distorting capital allocation by distorting investment decisions, lending decisions, and all the rest. And as I discussed briefly in my oral statement and more extensively in my prepared statement, the aggregate effect would be a less valuable capital stock producing a less valuable basket of goods and services, a smaller economy, less labor productivity, less employment, lower wages. There's simply nothing to be gained, regardless of what you believe about the existence or severity of a purported climate crisis. These initiatives cannot possibly have any effect on climate phenomena, let's say by the end of the century. And so they really do represent all cost and no benefit.
Thank you. One of the concerns I've got is the fiduciary responsibility of these investment groups, whether it's BlackRock or State Street or Vanguard or any other entities, big banks, whatever. One of the things it says, one of the comments I see here in some of the stuff I've been reading here is that corporate boardrooms have been turned into partisan platforms where political agendas overshadow sound financial management. I think in one of the articles here that we've pulled from Forbes about a year ago, it talked like a 14% decrease in the valuation of these companies. Mr. Zeitcher, in your testimony, you talk about ESG funds lagging behind other funds by 2 basis points per year. So my comment is, or my concern is, I guess, there's a fiduciary responsibility that these companies have for administering these funds. And Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Copeland, Mr. Allen, one of you want to answer the question. But it seems like to me like they've opened themselves up to a really big problem unless they're totally disclosing the fact that ESG investment does not make more money, does not give you a better return. But if there's an agenda here that's being forced on them from outside, it needs to be disclosed, and investors need to know that you can expect less returns. Is that a fair comment, Mr. Cunningham?
Well, I do think that special interest groups have asserted themselves and have pressured a lot of funds to elevate the priority of ESG. I think many funds, there's evidence that indicates that funds have believed that they get some private advantage from presenting themselves that way.
Well, even Mr. Fink the other day with BlackRock made the comment that he was ashamed about his investment policy with regards to ESG. So, I mean, they're starting to, I think Vanguard has pulled out of the net zero over in Europe. So they're beginning to understand that there's concern. And so my point is, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the people that they're investing this money for. Are they showing this? Are they disclosing this? Are you aware of this? Such that they can keep themselves from being sued?
Yeah, it's commonly said that following ESG practices is good for the long-term economic interests of a company or of a fund, but the empirical evidence doesn't support that assertion. I'm sure the people believe it's true, but the data don't bear it out. There is some evidence that there's a correlation between certain practices and certain outcomes, like certain board compositions and corporate performance, but scant evidence of any causation. And incidentally, a lot of proponents of these shareholder proposals don't even provide that rationalization under the SEC's current approach. They're allowed to require companies to put in proposals on any socially significant topic. So I think you've pinpointed a very serious problem for the funds. I think they recognize the problem and they're struggling to resolve it.
Well, I think Mr. Fink's comment makes that point, and I just have